Hey, um, this is the first time I've obviously made a video in a while. I've been pretty busy over the last I guess weeks or whatever. My job I was going to start with Morgan Stanley fell apart because Morgan Stanley cut 3,000 jobs around the company due to the Silicon Valley Bank collapse and some other macroeconomic factors. So, unfortunately, my position was one of those, and I did not find out until 2 weeks after I was supposed to start. So that's been a bit of an ordeal for me, and luckily I'm starting to get some unemployment benefits right now, but it's a little bit of a sticky situation. So hopefully the next time I will have better news on that the next time I make a video. But anyways, for now, I just have some spare time, so I thought I'd make a video talking about something that I've been kind of wanting to talk about for a little while. That's kind of a very broad topic, but this is going to be on just kind of a general, you know, what my views are on some things and what my views are not, and the difficulties of changing your views on a lot of different things in a relatively short period of time. For those of you that don't already know, I'm, of course, an atheist, and I come from a conservative religious background. I was raised in a fundamentalist school from pre-K through 12th grade, and my family is all religious Christians in, Southwest Missouri, where I grew up, very religious and very conservative. Um, my views since then have changed quite radically. Of course, I'm an atheist now, and in many other ways too, I just have changed. And some of those include things like politics, personal life choices, views on my career, and just general philosophies about a lot of things in life. I looked at people like Nietzsche as a big influence, now, and just a whole lot of things about my life have changed. But one thing that's kind of been a little bit of an interesting but kind of overall awkward issue for me as I've gotten older is things like politics. You know, um, Here in the U.S., whether we like it or not, politics matters in our day-to-day life. Politics is, it's hyper polarizing these days. Everybody cares about it. People get really mad about it either way. And depending on what part of the country you're in or what the predominant belief system of your office or workplace is, it can cause you a lot of problems. My views on politics have changed, but not quite as much as my general views on life have changed. Because, politics in the US these days, there's only two parties. Everything is just package politics. One side, happens to have a whole host of positions, and they're not necessarily all ones that I would agree with, But just to sum it up for you, I was an independent who leaned right back when I was a conservative Christian. Now I am an independent who leans left. I don't define myself as a Democrat or Republican. And I know politics is a sticky issue, one that's liable to make some people mad, but I think this is kind of worth going into so people can kind of understand a little bit of what I am and am not, as well as the troubles that kind of go with having to change your views on a lot of things. you know, um, to kind of just outline to you how some of my views have changed over the years. Back when I, lived in a relatively small town and, um, and back when I also, didn't understand as much about the world around me, I had a very, very, I guess you could say, nationalistic or whatever view, of the United States as opposed to other countries. I had a very um, black and white view of things like economics, as viewing socialism as all just one complete, perspective, and capitalism as another. And on things like social issues, I'd of course been indoctrinated to have very socially conservative views. So it made sense that under the age of 20, I had pretty, what some would consider, conservative views on politics and other things as well. Now I still consider myself to be independent on fiscal and economic issues. I maybe am a little bit more conservative than I used to be because I was a finance and accounting major in college, and I understand the necessity of a free market. In addition to having maybe some level of government overview and regulation within that market. So my views there are just very mixed. I'd say center right. On foreign policy, my views have been changed largely vis-a-vis life experiences. One of which is, I was in the fifth grade when the United States went into Afghanistan, and the sixth grade when we went into Iraq. I'm currently 33, and it was only a few years ago that we finally got out of Afghanistan. And Iraq, I guess it was what, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, but it was a lot longer than the original 6 months they said we were going to be in. So, some people, that's kind of what changed my mind there. I would not say by any means I'm a anti-military person. I think the U.S. military presence in the world actually is a stabilizing force and in many ways a good thing. But I just am very strongly opposed to, nation building and interventionism in the way that George W. Bush did it in the 2000s, and the way that some Republicans currently want to do it in Iran or North Korea, and some Democrats too. By the way, trust me. There's for those who think that one side is all good, one side and the other is all bad. Both parties are fraught with problems, you know. Um, but then, of course, comes the issue where I have changed the most. And this is, one, that kind of keys off on what essentially the purpose of this video is, changing your viewpoints on things in a relatively short period of time. I've already talked about religion ad nauseum in my other videos, so I'm not going to address that one much here. But I'm going to talk about some political issues, and the one I'm going to start off with is just the biggest tamale, and that is the Roe v. Wade overturn in 2022. This is going to be, whether I like it or not, abortion is a very unpleasant issue, but now it's going to be one that is going to be a very big issue for my generation because a lot of trigger laws went into effect here in the United States thanks to that federal overturn of the Roe v. Wade ruling. And that has led to all sorts of insane laws being passed, and now enforced. Many that ban abortion in almost all forms, and in some cases in all forms. Even in cases of rape or in cases where it's a medical necessity. So I'm just going to outlay my position on this very clearly. I am pro-choice. And the reason I'm pro-choice is not because I even know where life starts, if it starts at conception or where it starts. I don't know exactly at what point abortion should or should not be made illegal. I don't know a lot about this, but I do know in some circumstances it has to be kept legal. For at least situations like in the case of when it's a medical necessity, in the case of when, in the case of rape, in the case of early abortions. I don't understand all of the biology, but common sense tells me that there's difference between a pregnancy 2 days after conception and 2 days before delivery. Now, I don't know all the in between there, and it's an issue that honestly I feel uncomfortable getting into super in depth because I feel kind of queasy about anything that has to do with birth. I personally am looking forward to the day that machines will be the only ones giving birth and the human uterus won't be used anymore. But of course, that just shows you right there that the fact that I look at it that way, I'm a little bit more liberal. But where I'm just going with this is, that's one, some social issues I have tilted leftwards, and this is one of other many issues I've had to deal with as I've gotten older, because of course most people from my background were more conservative politically, and admittedly this is something I actually kind of just sideline most of the time in my life. I do stand on some social issues. I'm pro LGBTQ rights, and for good reason. To hate on people like that. For an atheist to hate on LGBTQ people, as I got into an argument with a guy about a few weeks ago who is an atheist that had an agenda against them, that's just honestly really stupid. There's really, at least Christians and Muslims can hide behind ancient Bible verses and Quran verses that tell them to hate gay people, but an atheist really can't hide behind that. So there's reasons and I'm also very strongly, obviously, for this, in support of the separation of church and state and some other more socially liberal policies. So in that sense, I have changed as I've gotten older. But again, politics is still really not what I like to make the center of my life. In fact, I'm different from some people in that as I'm getting older, I deprioritize politics, whereas a lot of people seem to get more into them as they get older. Because I recognize, as Otto von Bismarck once said, how, I think I'm slightly butchering this quote, but he said how politics goes on is like how sausages are made. You'd sleep better at night if you didn't know what goes on in the government. And I have full confidence that quote is very accurate, because I don't have a lot of overall faith in the government as a pure and wonderful entity that's doing good in the world. But at the same time, it is a thing that's necessary. And I don't demonize the government to the unhealthy extent that some people do, you know. But, in general, the reason I'm talking about all this is not to go on a huge political rant. It's because, you know, I had a couple of very awkward conversations over the last month. One was with a conservative atheist, and one was with a liberal atheist, and both were complete a-holes, for lack of a better word. I mean, especially the liberal atheist. The liberal atheist was just this lady who was just every single problem in the whole world was in her mind because she was a woman, and a woman that lived in Canada, by the way, too. Quebec, not exactly, maybe not the most liberal part of Canada, but still relatively gender equal in most, as far as most parts of the world go. And she just hated men viscerally and made no apology for it because of her own personal views on how gender played out. And she would just make the most condescending, arrogant, vapid arguments for more culturally why atheism was in a way both good and bad. And I don't know, it was a very weird argument, to be honest. I can't get too in depth with it. She was basically making the case for how certain forms of religion, as long as they were just educated people, were good or whatever. It was the most elitist yet also stupid thing I'd ever heard anyone say, and it didn't go too far before it devolved into us just kind of insulting each other. Unfortunately. And then with the conservative atheist, he was making kind of an anti-LGBTQ rant that was kind of bad, and I had to get a little upset with him because that was kind of ridiculous for an atheist to be doing that, I thought. So, but anyways, where I'm kind of going with this is, this is one area that's been kind of an uncertainty for me, as I've changed my worldview hugely, because changing over the time span of only 7 years or so, and then I guess it's been I'm 33 now. For at least the first 20 years was definitely of my life immersed in a very Christian background. So I don't know exactly, the timeline's not 100% clear, but it really is like having to change so many things. Sometimes you just almost will even kind of forget like how you used to see the world, and even kind of have flashbacks sometimes to how you used to see a lot of different things. Like, not in regards to religion, I have flashbacks to how I used to see, different types of people in the world as bad. I used to see, I used to see obviously secular people as bad. I used to see people that were politically liberal as very bad. And, and a lot of that has changed. And like I said, some of it hasn't changed. I still am very politically independent and not by any means a hardcore liberal or hardcore conservative. But basically, the thing that's very hard about it, if I can make one central point of all of it, is sometimes it's hard for your life and your subconscious self to catch up with your conscious self, if that makes any sense at all. And what I mean by subconscious self is we all have what's considered a shadow self, like our subconscious thinking, our past history and memories, that essentially is the part of us that we can't control, that, plays out when our conscious self isn't controlling our thoughts and are controlling our actions. And it kind of is hard to sometimes get past that, when you used to see everything a different way, and then you have to inverse that. You still have some of that old shadow self still in you, and you have to kind of learn, I guess, to incorporate it into yourself, which admittedly is something I still struggle to do, because it's just, I have only had really less than a decade to do it, and I mean, in some ways, there's been so much new information flooded into my head as I've gotten older. Sometimes it's a little bit hard for me to always remember and process it all, because, it's the downsides of changing a lot as you get, older. But then again, I know that in the long run, it's better too, because, I'd rather be making these changes now in my 20s and 30s than up when I'm in my 40s, 50s, or 60s, when it'll be too late. And at that point, I'll be probably set in whatever viewpoints I'll have, So that's kind of what this video is about. I was kind of debating as to whether or not I should call it "Why I Suck at Being a Liberal" or "Changes in Worldviews." But I thought that, the problems of changing your worldviews would be a more fitting title. Because really, I mean, that's one of the problems I have in changing my worldviews. Essentially, now I'm a little bit more liberal than conservative, but not monumentally so. But still, having to inverse my positions, even on something like politics, where my views have changed a lot as I've gotten older, so many people from my past just don't understand or still judge me for a lot of the changes that have taken place, or changes on things like gender and feminism. I mean, my views there have changed hugely because of just new information that I've gotten as I've gotten older about both differences and similarities between men and women that are different than what I was told growing up, whereas I was taught very, very specific gender roles that men are a certain way and women are a certain other way. And I've learned very much as I've gotten older that there are some biological differences between men and women for sure, but there's a lot of similarities, and basically it just depends very heavily on the individual. That's one thing I've learned more than anything, about gender as I've gotten older, is that it's not a simple issue, and you can't just say men are this way and women are that way. If there's one thing I have learned, that is it. So, um, it's I don't know. Sometimes it's a thing that stresses me out, and admittedly, it's it's socially it's very hard to, because all of my former connections still are conservative Christians, and I'm not really even used to fitting in amongst liberals or atheists or basically people that are different from what I grew up with. So that's kind of what this video is about. It's a mix of, I know politics is not a pleasant topic, and a lot of the topics I brought up here are not pleasant topics, but it's a mix of things of my ideology as well as just the personal touch to it, if you want to call it that, of having to change your worldview a lot in a short period of time, because it is it has been a very big issue for me throughout my 20s and into my 30s, and I'm just curious as to if other people watching this have the same issues, if you're relatively young and you had to change a lot of your views in a short period of time, and you did find that kind of challenging, or if you're older and you look back on it, what was the end result of it? I'd love to hear it in the comment section. Same thing if you're younger and you're currently changing your views on things, or you don't think you'll ever change your views or whatever. Feel free to say so in the comment section below. But other than that, just thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.